Give me a couple of seconds. I went over the 30-second counter. It takes a while to set up Facebook and YouTube.
Steven, Santa's watching.
I know, Santa's watching. All right. We're live now. Today on the Shrewd Dudes podcast. It's our final episode of the year, so of course, like last year, we are doing once again the douche of the year.
Douchey. Extra douche.
Extra douche.
That's
so,
douchiest.
as we mentioned in several other broadcasts, the two douches of the year that are going head to head are Justin Trudeau and Volodymyr Zelensky.
Yeah, I'm going to let you say that every time.
Because I can see it with an accent.
Yes, right. It is the accent.
It is the accent. So
the Ukrainian accent.
That will be the start of the show. And then after that, we'll have a bit of a Hero of the Year segment.
A freaking free-for-all.
And then it'll be a free-for-all. And we'll just go from there and we'll do all our stuff for 2023.
Mm-hmm.
So once we do the intro, then we can really get going.
All right, let's do this, man. Let's get it done.
Alrighty. So this is our end of the year segment. Before we start, Merry Christmas to everybody. It has been a long year of 2022. There's been a lot of ups and downs, and things in Canada have had some things go right and some things go very, very wrong.
Very wrong indeed.
Very wrong indeed.
Mm-hmm.
So, Danny, tell us why you've been away for the past couple of days, and I'm going to do some shameless promoting.
I got sick of Calgary. Calgary's a like a hellscape, and I saw the weather. Like Calgary was going to go into like literally deep freeze mode.
Oh yeah,
for like a week. I saw that, and I'm like, that's it. I'm out of here. Done. So I escaped to the slightly warmer oasis of Kelowna with my family. So I'm spending the time here with my family, hanging out, having a good time, experiencing all the joys of teenage angst with two teenage daughters of my sister, which is really fun when you've never dealt with teenagers and their teenagey attitude. It's really fun, If you have no self-esteem, that is a terrible time to come.
Yikes.
But other than that, it's been nice. It's been nice. I've been able to kind of like do some reading. It's almost like a 2-week vacation, like where it's just kind of like it's chill. You're not really in a rush to do anything. So I'm just like focusing on doing a lot of things that I can't do at home. So yeah, I know when I get back to work, I'm going to be missing these times. So I like to cherish, Danny, cherish these times. And then Steven has been enjoying all the social benefits of being in Calgary with all of his friends and family.
Well, mostly just freezing our tushies off.
That's right. House to house, is it cold?
No, my house is much better than my previous place. My previous place, you had to like crank it up to about 27. 11? No, you had to crank your thermostat to max in order to get any heat. So you'd either be like freezing or cooking. Mm-hmm. There would be no in between.
Nothing.
And in the basement, it was like, But in this place, usually I can, like, throughout all of fall and winter, I can set it to one temperature and just forget it for the entire time. It's very handy.
That's pretty cool. So your house is not terribly cold then?
Oh, no, my house is... I'm in a t-shirt. I'm in a t-shirt in my basement. And I am actually like a little warm.
Nice. Yeah. Actually, the only downside about the weather for me has been on the way here. We had to drive at night on Friday evening. No, Saturday evening. And oh my gosh, like at one point, the cars in front of us were kicking up so much snow. I was like, I can't see a thing. Great. Like hopefully I don't run. Great. I hope I don't run into a tree. But I was playing that wonderful Canadian game of Where's the Road. And that's always a fun game. It's it's fun for the whole family, except for my mom, who was like grabbing onto everything she could hold on to, like
scary beyond no reason.
Freaking out. Oh, she gets very freaked out with winter roads.
See, okay.
Thankfully, she had me, the epic super driver.
Yeah. See, I'm good, mostly just because I learned from terrible experiences.
Okay.
Well, my first car did not have defrost. And so I had two famous lines from my first car. Okay. I have the line from my father saying, "Stephen, are we on a road?" And I'm like, "I think so." "Oh no, are we in a lane?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think so. I think we're in a lane." And then there was another time I was driving my coworker home because his car had broken down. I'm driving my coworker home, and the defrost was not working. And I'm driving along 16th Avenue by the lights of the car in front of me because it's like pitch black outside.
Wow.
And he's like, "Stephen, what can you see?" And I'm like, "Those lights in front of me." He's like, "How do you know where we are?" "Well, I'll roll down my window once in a while. I'll figure out where we are." He's like, "You are both the bravest and dumbest man I've ever met." I'm like, "Okay, I'll take it."
You are a glutton for punishment, sir.
Yep, I am. But I just thought I got a kick out of that. "You're the bravest and dumbest man I've ever met." He's like, "I wouldn't even think of doing this."
That's awesome.
I don't have a choice. My car sucks.
You're a crazy man. You're a crazy man.
Well, like my van, the fuse is going, and so sometimes the defrost just does not work.
That's not good.
Yeah, I've had to improvise a few times and scream at my van. I'm like, "Why does this keep happening to me?"
Well, it's been a while because like my family and I, we have to remember, like, when was the last time we had a very, very cold week during Christmas? It was 2018. That was the last time we had a defreeze during Christmas season. So we're back. We're back.
What?
Again. Yeah, because 2018 was when there was like minus 30 and 40 during Christmas week. We've had minus 40 weeks.
Danny, we had minus 25 on Christmas Day last year.
Yeah, minus 25, not minus 40.
Okay, I guess. This was like beyond cold.
Yeah, this was like really cold that week. Because like that Christmas in 2018, like my car completely froze. Like it would not start for like a week and a half. So that was like the coldest like cold snap we had in like a long time. So, but yeah, we're back and we gotta finish off the year because this year was slightly better than we ever expected. We were like at the end of last year, we were predicting that that the lockdowns were going to be extended for a freaking ever, and then we had this one very unexpected thing that nobody saw coming, which is
the Freedom Convoy.
The Freedom Convoy, which was like the greatest moment in I think like one of the most like iconic moments in Canadian history. That week where they were driving out to Ottawa like in one giant like heap. I think that was one of the most unifying and positive and it was great, incredibly, and not only for Canada but the entire world got united. We actually did a special, a live stream special on the Freedom Convoy. Remember, we covered all the stories, all the things that were happening. We actually did like a full thing on it. You and I. You don't remember, do you?
I do.
Yeah, it was great. It was like it was a really fun because the Freedom Convoy inspired the Netherlands, like the Dutch,
the farmers' protest.
The farmers' protest. A lot of the Dutch, they basically said that they got their inspiration from the Freedom Convoy. Australia also tried to do their own. A lot of European countries, like a lot of people try to do that, like try to emulate it, because up until that point, there was no protest that was actually having an impact. Like like people were protesting the lockdowns like crazy. People were telling us hey, why are you even bothering to even get on protest? It's not making a difference. This was the first protest that actually had an effect, like a really giant impact, which is great.
I'm laughing, Danny, because I was like modifying the title for Twitch for the live stream,
and
I could not. They would not let me call it the Douche of the Year.
What they? Whoa!
They said that they went against the content moderation policy, and so I had to call it the schmuck of the year. And I'm like, okay.
Muckers.
Yes, -11 is definitely not baby weather for Texas. -11 is actually when they had that massive freeze.
Yeah.
It was about -10 to -11. So
yeah,
not baby weather for Texas.
I will say though, one of my my brother-in-law's sister's boyfriend, he's flying back to Victoria today. I don't know how would you say that? My brother-in-law's sister's boyfriend. Easier way to say that?
Yeah.
That seems like the most like, I don't know. If there's another way, tell me, but I don't know about it. Anyways, he's flying back to Victoria, and he told me, like, yeah, he's not even sure how well the flight will go, because apparently Victoria got about half a foot of snow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big deal for Victoria. Victoria doesn't get snow, and they don't know what to do, and they're freaking out over there.
Yeah.
And Vancouver apparently shut down because of snow. Mm-hmm. Don't worry. We have a carbon tax, and that'll take care of everything. The magic carbon tax offering to the Earth goddess will appease her anger and will stop all these weather phenomenon from, like, taking out Canada. That's how it works. Because basically, climate change is basically like a revived form of Earth worship. Mother Earth. We have to appease Mother Earth in order to keep her weather, attacks from getting us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so let's actually jump in and talk what we're wanting to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about Trudeau first.
All right. Can you share your screen so I can actually see what you're doing?
Yep, because I'm totally on the wrong screen right now.
Thank you, sir.
Christmas, making mistakes for the start of 2023.
Well, you know what? Something. The more things change, the more things stay the same. Hey, Stephen?
Yikes.
Just saying.
Oh, and just to spite you.
Mm.
Just to spite you.
You mean like every day?
Pretty much, yep.
So much hate over there.
So much hate. But there isn't hate right now because the Leafs won today.
Oh, well, it's you gotta really enjoy these wins because they'll never happen in the second round. I enjoyed that one. I definitely enjoyed that one.
One day.
Oh my goodness, that was good. You kind of set me up for that one. Anyways, take us into Trudeau. Why? So, Trudeau and Zelensky, Trudeau's been a douche for
years,
a long time. For years,
but his douchiness was subdued.
Well, it was slowly ramping up. 2015, Trudeau came in. He was the big thing, the hot new kind of item. Everyone was all excited about him. Even what was it, Joe Rogan podcast. He actually said when Trudeau first came, it was I thought this guy was pretty cool. He was a cool new liberal guy. Even Bill Maher thought he was pretty cool. But even Bill Maher and Joe Rogan and a couple other people they actually did a whole diatribe on Trudeau, and they said wow, this guy went from being the most the big star, the rising star of liberal wokeism, to basically being an a full-on dictator. Actually, Bill Maher called him a dictator because of what he did with the Freedom Convoy. And so so this guy, he started off like a big star. Now he's hated in most of the world, and even people who used to be big fans of him, they think very low of him. So the first evidence that we have that Trudeau could potentially be the douche of the year this year, first of all, is this is from Kelowna Now. But it's a story that's kind of it's been in a lot of papers. But basically, there's a recent poll that said 30% of Canadians think Justin Trudeau is the worst prime minister since 1968, poll suggests. So that's a big deal because, one of the problems that we have with Trudeau is that most real conservatives already can't stand him, but he's starting to become unpopular even among his own people. And so that's a that's a big rise from what we had before. Right, Stephen?
Yep. I'm just
doing stuff.
Can you say who is the prime minister in 1968?
I'm going to go with his father.
His father was elected in 1968.
Oh, well, who was before him? William Mackenzie King?
Nope. That was 1948.
Okay, so who was before him?
Pearson.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't think Pearson would be that hated. Because Trudeau in the West was despised. For good reason.
Yeah. Well, when Trudeau visits Alberta, he basically has to make secret visits. Like, I think he came this year during the Stampede, and his visit had to be completely secretive. Like, Rebel News covered it, and they basically said that, like, when he came, he basically only had one, like, Stampede breakfast with one of the Liberal people running for MP here. And it was totally secret, and only people who were, like, by invite only. And then he went to the Stampede, and they had to basically clear out the Stampede, or like go when there was nobody there to get photo ops. So when Trudeau says that, he's like, oh, I love Alberta and I love Albertans and Albertans love me, I'm like, no, Albertans can't stand you. Like, basically anytime you go here, people like swarm you because you're like a very unpopular guy. The most unpopular, I'd say.
The most ever.
The most unpopular soul.
But unpopularity is not the only defining attribute.
Okay, what we got next?
Well, of course, I guess this is also in relation to popularity. Canada's Trudeau rebuked by some members of the European Parliament for his treatment of convoy protesters. One member rebuked Trudeau for how protesters were treated under your quasi-liberal boot in recent months.
Yeah. So this was like after this wasn't even after the Freedom Convoy. This was after the response, because everyone saw, like, okay, so everyone who saw the Freedom Convoy, how they put it down, they basically sent an army of police officers or like security. Who knows who these people were? We couldn't even verify if they were real RCMP or somebody else. But anyways, they showed up, and there are some videos of some brutal like violence against peaceful protesters, like police officers holding people down, kneeing them, somebody using a gun and smacking them with the back of like the butt end of the gun, like horses trampling over old women, everything like that. This was not a peaceful takedown, even though like Trudeau said like, oh well, it was good because nobody got hurt. I'm like, yeah, except for the people that who your police like thugs like bashed in. So the world saw this and they were horrified at this, because this resembles the kind of crackdowns that you see in China, the ones that you saw in Cuba, because Cuba had a big uprising of sorts, and they cracked down hard. Venezuela had one not that long ago, I think within the last 2 years. They had a big uprising, and they had like basically like trucks and people like being run over by like police forces. So whenever you see this level of violent crackdown on protesters, particularly really peaceful protesters, it's impossible to ignore. Trudeau and his media here in Canada tried to cover this up, because the media basically tries to like paint it with like beautiful little strokes, but the European Parliament was having none of it. And so they had a couple of people who basically spoke out, and this gave you a like behind the scenes, like how the world really sees Trudeau. It was wonderful. People were cheering it here in Canada, and a lot of the Americans were cheering it as well. So yeah, go for it. You can see Trudeau right behind him, this guy.
Poštovane kolege, dragi građani, premijeru Trudeau. Sloboda, pravo izbora, pravo na život i zdravlje, pravo na rad za mnoge od nas, to su temeljna ljudska prava za koje su milioni građana Europe i svijeta položili svoje živote. Za obranu naših prava i prava naše djece, koje smo stjecali stoljećima, mnogi od nas, uključujući i mene, spremni smo riskirati vlastitu slobodu i položiti vlastite živote. Nažalost, danas su među nama i oni koji gaze te temeljne vrijednosti. Kanada, nekada simbol modernog svijeta, je pod vodstvom vaše kvazi-liberalne čizme proteklih mjeseci postala simbol kršenja temeljnih ljudskih prava i građanskih sloboda. Gledali smo kako konjima gaze žene, kako samohranim roditeljima blokirate bankovne račune, da ne mogu platiti djeci školovanje, da ne mogu platiti lijekove, da ne mogu platiti račune za struju i vodu, da ne mogu platiti rate kredita za svoje domove. Za vas su to možda liberalne metode. Međutim, za mnoge građane svijeta to je diktatura najgore vrste.
Dang, son!
Yep.
The worst kind. So he basically got called out straight up as a dictator by a member of like the EU. By the way, there's another video by that lady. Did you have that one by? I think it's in the same stream. There's like one lady who really called him out, and she was like, you know, like, I don't know if it's that one.
Christine Anderson.
Yeah, is that the one, or is it this one below?
Well, these ones.
It's a lady. It's a lady with the short hair. I don't know if that's the official one.
This and
yeah, probably that one. Now is it? Is she there? Where is it?
Out.
Yeah, there.
Thank you. Based on Article 195. Out that it would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
Whoa!
Oh, it's so good.
Pulled no punches. That was straight up.
So good.
And he was right there. He was right there in front.
Well, both of them were right there. Both of those times, like the Croatian guy looks right at him and he's like, "Yep," under your like
over his shoulder.
Yep. And then she's like, "Spare us your presence, you thug,
you douchebag." You know, like. And the thing is, I remember following that when they actually assembled and Trudeau actually spoke. Like, she actually did speak at that thing. I think a big, massive chunk of the entire parliament, like the seats, were empty. And I found out that it's because people intentionally did not want to hear him, so they just didn't take their seats. They actually avoided, like, you know, like sitting down. CBC obviously shows Trudeau, like, you know, like speaking, be like, "Oh, look how proud we are, Mr. Trudeau, like the biggest hypocrite on earth is standing up here talking about freedom." But, like, you know, in reality, the EU Parliament was like, "Nope, you're a gigantic, you know, like a colossal hypocrite." They would have none of it. So this was like, I was very proud because here in Canada they try to hide it, but in that part of the world, no, thank you.
I like. Well, no, I'm just responding to Conqueror. I like all those, like Biden, Schwab, Bill Gates, Fauci, Tam, Freeland, Trudeau, and the UK. Are you talking about the new UK PM or are you talking about Boris? Well, actually, there's been like 3 PMs in the past like 6 months, so.
There has been, especially like there was one that lasted a little while.
The new guy. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I haven't done a ton of research on the new guy, but we can potentially talk about him after Zelensky. And of course, Fauci. Like, Fauci was the douche of the year for 2020 and 2021. And the King Charles.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so all of those are really bad people. Yeah. But these two are just like their effect, like Trudeau's effect on the Canadian people, And we're going to continue talking about that because we're not done. And then Fauci's, I mean, no, not Fauci, but Zelensky's desires for the world are just nasty. So
yeah, it got really bad.
Let's just continue.
A little added thing to that. So you have to remember, it's not just a freedom convoy. It's not just a crackdown, the police crackdown. It's also what they did with what Trudeau did with the the bank accounts. Remember, Trudeau and his government used hacked materials because, like first it was GoFundMe, then it was what was the other one, Stephen? Give, Second, Go.
Yep.
Both of those were like people providing all sorts of details, and then Trudeau basically went above and beyond and used hacked materials, which some internet troll hacked the accounts, revealed all this stuff online, and they didn't even care. They're like, oh great, we'll use this, and they used that information to target people for just giving to the just for giving money to the convoy. And that there were stories of like single moms in Chilliwack, BC, whose bank accounts were flagged and shut down, and she couldn't even pay her rent and her children's things, and all that became a big scandal. He didn't care. This is the kind of out of touch, cold, heartless, merciless, no empathy kind of actions by basically a brutal dictator, like you said. So this is why we kind of add to that. So yeah, take away this article, man.
Yep. All right. So from the Daily Wire, Canadians furious after Trudeau's fringe minority comments as thousands of truckers head to the capital. This is, of course, from January. So we referred to the nation's truck convoy headed to Ottawa as a fringe minority, as thousands of people reportedly headed to the nation's capital in opposition to the vaccine mandate for truck drivers. He shared the comments in response to a reporter's question, and here's the video.
The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other, who know that following the science and stepping up to protect each other is the best way to continue to ensure our freedoms, our rights, our values as a country.
What a complete and total pathological liar. Everything in that comment was absolutely, completely bunk. Everything yes, they're the majority, but the way that you protect rights is you don't protect the rights of the majority, you protect the rights of the minority. That's how rights are supposed to work. And when you trample the minority, you're not actually protecting rights, you're actually violating rights. That's the whole idea of rights, to protect the little people. But the thing is, they even asked them. They talked about this in the Freedom Convoy. What do they call that? The commission that was looking into it, and they basically said, don't you think it's the job of a prime minister to avoid to unite Canadians, not to create division, but to actually create some kind of unity? And he's like, no, I think that the job of a prime minister is to keep people safe, which shows you that he has no idea what how he has no idea how to respond properly. This man basically makes division. He called them terrorists. They called him pretty much every name in the book. He had his deplorables moment, like Hillary Clinton, with the small fringe minority, which pissed off a lot of Canadians. And so this man has absolutely no compunction whatsoever against completely hypocritically and arrogantly throwing people under the bus without any problem. And it's because of the actions, the leadership of him, or his leading, and the actions of his government that it basically came to the head that it did. Because this could have been avoided by actually having talks. But he refused to have talks. He was like, nope, not talking to you, never talking to you. Talking is pointless. Well, because in the commission, somebody asked him, what was it? Do you actually believe that, the fundamental right of protest? He's like, oh yeah, no, I believe that people have the right to make their voices heard. But, I think that using political protest to try to
change public policy.
Change public policy is problematic or worrisome.
Yeah.
Which means he has no idea. Like, no, he does have an idea, but that response elicited one of the strongest rebukes by Viva Frei that I've ever heard. He basically said, that is how a dictator would answer.
Mm-hmm.
Because dictators don't look at protests as a legitimate aim to change public policy. They see it as something that you can safely ignore. And so it basically became, that became a tacit admission that he absolutely thinks like a dictator. That was one of the things I saw at the inquiry. What did you see anything in the inquiry, Stephen, or anything that came out of that kind of like made you think about Trudeau's actions, or what?
Well, like what you had mentioned before was a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like where he was saying is just like, like my secondary motivation was about confidence in their institutions, society's ability to function and enforce the rule of law. Well, but when it's not being respected, nothing that the trucker convoy did was breaking the rule of law.
No, and they kept calling it like an illegal.
Well, they kept an occupation, and some were like, well, this could easily devolve into like January 6th. And
they wanted to make that sound like that.
They didn't just want it to make it sound like that. Like, I was watching through some old videos and I was like, oh, I had forgotten that they had just like put like a garbage bin full of giant rocks in the middle of Ottawa right next to the trucker protest.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, and they're like, is any company in the area that could be using this? And they're like, there's no active construction here. It's like, oh, so the government put this here so that some idiot would potentially become violent.
Mm-hmm.
And then that would turn public opinion against us. And then eventually it was just like, well, we can't say anything. They couldn't find any behavior aside for some random individuals, which had nothing to do with the convoy, which had flags that were debatable. And they're like, see, that's it. That's everybody a part of the convoy is supporting these people. And it's like, no, you're painting everybody with a broad. I was going to say Zelensky is an NPC. Yeah. Well, we'll talk about Zelensky in a bit. Friends.
Okay, one more thing. So another thing about the convoy. Okay, so first of all, anybody who saw the convoy and actually saw the real coverage of the convoy, like that was one of the proudest moments as a Canadian. I saw the people there, the way that people were acting. People were actually going out of their way to shovel snow, to pick up garbage, to try to help the neighborhood. They were amazing Canadians there. But the Canadian government, the federal Liberals, the way their behavior, and of course, remember, every behavior follows the leader. The person who sets the tone is Trudeau, and they're following his lead. Remember, every single one of them was parroting blatant lies about the convoy. They accused the convoy of trying to kill people by starting a fire in a building. That was a lie. That was a complete lie. It was totally fabricated. It was some two guys that had nothing to do with the convoy went into a building. Do you remember that? They went into a building, tried to lock a door and try to start a fire in the one building. And then you saw clips of MP, liberal MP, liberal MP, liberal MP, liberal MP, nonstop. They're all saying, "Oh, these protesters are trying to kill people by starting a fire." Yep. Total lie. Nobody apologized. Then they basically had the swastika thing and the Confederate flag thing, and we find out that the Confederate flag, that's almost entirely proven, likely proven that was a liberal plant, because they even have the name of the individual. It's very likely that was a liberal plant. And then you have Trudeau having the freaking gall to accuse an MP, a conservative MP who's a Jewish woman, of standing with swastikas. And I think that is where he sank as low as you can get, and people were freaking mad. There's an article I think I posted on that, Stephen. I'm not sure which one it is. It's the... I don't know if you have it. Do you have that article?
No. I only have two more: Washington Post and New York Post.
Oh, crap. Maybe I didn't do it. I don't know if we can maybe look at it like Trudeau calls conservative Jewish MP.
Oh yeah.
Stands for swastikas. Like I remember I looked it up, but it was a big deal. So for anybody who doesn't know or doesn't remember, one of the things that Trudeau did, like that was like stinking inappropriate, was he basically said, in a nutshell, he responded to a Jewish MP who's everyone knows she's Jewish. And he responded. You can actually play the video. I'm not sure if.
Hopeful vision for public life isn't a naive dream. It could be a powerful force for change. If Canadian
Party members can stand with people who wave swastikas, they can stand with people who wave the Confederate flag.
Oh yeah.
We will choose to stand with Canadians.
People were freaking furious.
Yep.
Yeah, and then I don't know if a little bit after this, like if there's like that one conservative guy who tries to call out Trudeau for this. Yeah. No, wait.
Not in this video.
Not in this clip. Okay. So there's a guy. There's one of the guys that comes out. Maybe the National Post has it. But there's one of the MPs, like one of the male MPs. I was so proud when he did this. Mm-hmm. One of the male MPs actually went straight up and he said, like, I cannot believe you would do something as crazy as trying to basically imply that a Jewish member of the Conservative Party stands for swastikas. And that comment, I remember when I watched that, I was pretty furious. I mean, I'm not big on the guilt, trying to do gotchas. There are gotcha things that they do in Parliament. Mm-hmm. This wasn't a gotcha. This was a straight up, you screwed up, man. You freaking screwed up. You had the gall, the nerve to basically accuse a member. And it wasn't like he was being asked this by, I don't know, Andrew Scheer or some other member that had nothing to do with Jewish, and he may have, I don't know, maybe forgotten that there's Jewish members. This was being asked by a Jewish member. And he actually had the freaking gall to suggest that she stood with swastikas. So that was, for me, I was pissed. I was super pissed at this man for doing that. And then after, people were like saying, like, you need to freaking apologize right now, because that was outrageous. And then he didn't apologize. He just literally just left. He left Parliament and just pretended like it never happened. Like, this is how insanely grotesque this man is. It was so horrible. If this was switched, this was like a conservative leader who accused like a liberal Jewish member of like standing with swastikas, it would be World War III. But no, because it's a conservative like member, it doesn't matter and it doesn't work. So Trudeau, in every part of the Freedom Convoy, was an absolute narcissist, an absolute like a-hole, and he handled it horribly. And even in the commission that came out that investigated the entire thing, Trudeau just showed an absolute, complete inability to even see the harm that he pulled, and him and Chrystia Freeland, they were doubling down, and they basically feel like they're the heroes of the story rather than the villains. So from beginning to end of the Freedom Convoy, Trudeau showed that he is an absolute dictator in waiting. He's the most dangerous man, I think, in like North America, by far. If Steve is doing something, I don't know what he's doing, but
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay. So, but the Freedom Convoy, always the big thing. But then I think there was like two other things that Trudeau did this year that basically, it wasn't just a Freedom Convoy. He went beyond and beyond.
There were some other things.
Yes.
So first off, Canada bans this was last year, but still.
Yes, but it was like,
it was also it got voted in this year.
Yeah.
So Canada bans conversion therapy, threatens therapist with prison. And so it received royal assent last year, amends the Canadian Criminal Code to criminalize causing someone to undergo conversion therapy, taking a child out of Canada for the purpose of conversion therapy, profiting for the provision of conversion therapy, or advertising or promoting the practice. So Banned therapy is meant to repress a person's non-cisgender gender identity, as well as repress or reduce a person's gender expression that does not conform to the sex assigned to the person at birth. So it's so broad that it couldn't fit anything. And of course, when you looked at it, and we did a deep dive earlier in another section and another part of the show, and it's so broad that it's basically like, oh yeah, like if you're a pastor and you're preaching against homosexuality, that could be seen as conversion therapy. If somebody is asking you for prayer and counseling because they're facing these urges, that's conversion therapy. Like, this is entirely meant as a law against dissent regarding the LGBTQ. And that was truly disgusting. And it goes against every principle of free speech and a democratic society and being open to difference of opinion, difference of ideas.
Yeah. So you have the conversion therapy law, and then you have his new gun grab, because earlier this year, I think he introduced that handgun ban. Right, that was earlier this year. But then now, they introduced that new gun ban against rifles, against hunters, basically. Which shows that this man is following the Marxist playbook to a T. Basically, removing the ability to have guns entirely. Right. And so, like, it's not just he started off with handguns, then he expanded it, and now he's going after rifles. So he's getting less and less.
Like every year. So 2020 banned 1,500 makes and models of military-grade assault-style firearms, which some of them were absolutely ridiculous, and most of them were already banned. It was like, we're banning RPGs. It's like, what? You don't need to list that you're banning this. This is, like, absolutely impossible to obtain in Canada. And
some of them were, like, were really silly.
Yeah.
Like, my buddy was telling me, some of these were, like, these aren't even, like, dangerous. Like, why is he banning these ones?
Yeah.
Right? So it shows that it's not thoughtful.
The thought of danger.
Yeah. But addition to this is it's not just that they're introducing this legislation and trying to ban rifles, but again, remember, they're lying about it. I've seen several segments, loads of commentary on this from political commentators as well as from MPs who are saying they're not following the usual procedure. They're using all sorts of dirty tactics to try to rush this through. This is how they work. They our prime minister does not care about procedure. He will cheat. He will lie. He will do whatever he can to try to get things done. He hates. He absolutely hates. Having to defend his anything. He wants to be a dictator, which is why he does all these things. He doesn't he doesn't like the rule of law. He doesn't like having to prove his thing. So he's the gun ban that he's pushing right now. Add that to the pile, of douchiness that he's throwing in there. Then add on top of that. We don't have an article for this one, but his little secret deal with with NDP.
Yep.
Right. Everyone heard about that. Everyone's like, this is garbage. People who were NDP thought this is terrible. We voted for the NDP. We didn't vote for the Liberals.
Yep.
Coalition. A coalition again, which was designed entirely to be able for Trudeau to be able to rule like a dictator, like a majority government without fail.
Yeah.
And then
that was actually the first political rally I ever went to. Which was a rally in Calgary against the coalition government of the Liberals and the NDP and the Greens. It might have been the Bloc. Liberals and the NDP and the Bloc. Yeah. Because it was they have a minority government, so let's form a coalition. So we'll have the majority. And it's like, nope. Majority of your people did not vote for this.
Yeah. And then you saw that the, what do you call it? They're pushing a bill that basically tries to mess with the internet. I don't know if you remember what bill that is.
Bill C-11?
Bill C-11, where they're trying to basically they're trying to keep afloat their preferred media sources, like the Global News, City News, all
CBC,
these TV, all the ones that are trying to basically these are government propaganda sites.
Yep.
because they're getting money, and they're trying to like sink like independent sites like True North, like Post Millennial, like Rebel, all these ones. So again, acting like a dictator, and then I think that's it. Is that? Oh no! Finally, I'll just add this on. They're also throwing in, like, they're trying to remove even more protections from MAID.
Yep.
We talked about this too. They're basically making it easier and easier to kill.
As long as you're slightly depressed, then you can kill yourself here in Canada.
Right. These are all like all the kind of actions. Now I know like you can compare like I know it's you don't want to go. Well, what's that law like that? You don't, whoever invokes Hitler loses the argument. There's like a law or something like that. Anyways, but like I know like so many dictators, this is what they do. Like it's incredible. Like when you look at the trajectory of like people like Castro. When Fidel Castro came in, Godwin's law. Thank you. When Fidel Castro came into power, the first thing some of the first things he did, he outlawed like free speech. He outlawed guns. He outlawed like all sorts of like these things. This is what dictators do. And Trudeau's not even trying to hide it. People know that he's trying to be a dictator. Unfortunately, too many of our country have been totally brainwashed and mesmerized by this like lunatic. And unfortunately, we are basically in the beginning stages of seeing a dictatorial takeover of our country. This is not a regular prime minister. This is a prime minister.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I believe that he is a great candidate for the
douche of the year.
Douche of the year, man.
Douche of the year.
Yep.
He's all right. So the second candidate, who I'm like, I agree with you. Trudeau is probably number one, but Zelensky got progressively worse. He's up there, and he got progressively worse simply because what he wants has the potential to kill tens of millions of people.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So,
take it away.
Briefly, of course, Zelensky went and begged for more money and said, "Oh, thank you so much for all the money for my corrupt nation and giving me bullets and tanks and all these things so that I can fight back." No. I could go and do it. I'll do okay. I'll do Ukrainian.
Thank you so much for
thank you so much for sending me the tanks and the guns and the bullets to fight back against the Russians who are reclaiming territory of the part of my country that they want to be Russian. But I don't want them to be Russian. I want them to be Ukrainian. Because I will not have any dissent. Actually, I need to like put that as the last article. Zelensky removes opposition party.
That's right.
That should be the first line. Ukraine bans largest opposition party. I don't know. I don't like going to the World Socialist website, but it's true.
It's true.
Ukrainian court has officially banned the activities of the country's largest opposition party, the opposition Platform for Life Party. The decision was handed down, yada, 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 and effectively upheld Volodymyr Zelensky's banning of 11 political parties that Kyiv regarded as anti-Ukrainian and collaborationists earlier in March. It was then approved by the Ukrainian parliament in May. Yeah, this was entirely scummy by Volodymyr. And there was no need for it aside from I want to suppress dissent, and this war gives me a great excuse to suppress those who disagree with me. It was like, this is the actions of a tyrant. This is what Trudeau wants to do.
Yeah.
He would love, instead of saying, "Oh, the conservatives are those who wave swastikas," be like, "Oh, no, I'll just get rid of that party. And then there'll be only one party. They will only be my party." Like, Trudeau wants that kind of power. But the Canadian people they're still not submissive enough for that. But they're close. Yeah. The Canadian people are very submissive, and the majority of Canadians went along with a lot of terrible things.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you remember, Stephen, like way back early in the pandemic, 2020, Trudeau and his party tried to pass some kind of something in Parliament that would have given them complete and total freedom to spend all they wanted without parliamentary approval. Basically, they basically wanted to take the crisis and use it as a way of being able to to do whatever they wanted without any oversight. And then, thankfully, all the opposition parties were like, "Oh, hell no!" Even the NDP said no, which was like a big deal. So
it was a big deal.
Yeah. So again, we're not there because thankfully, a lot of parties were saying no, more because they didn't want to lose their power. Yeah, they wouldn't want to lose power. But we're heading there. Like Trudeau has already made it abundantly clear that he wants that. But Zelensky is a very interesting guy. He strikes me as a full-fledged con man.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he strikes me as. Like somebody who puts on a show, who makes these big pronouncements and acts the man, but in reality is a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yep.
That's the impression I get from him. Yeah, definitely. I don't get a guy who like legitimately cares about the country. That seems like showmanship.
Well, and so that was the first example of him not caring about the country.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second one, I wanted to use it for the first line, even though it's from today.
Okay.
Ukraine will never surrender. It's like, dude, you are never going to surrender, despite the fact that your nation is hopelessly outmatched in this fight, and the eastern part of your country wants to join Russia anyway.
Every war that you've seen in the last I don't know how many, let's say 50 years. Yeah. There was always a goal to get peace talks of some kind, right? The problem that we're seeing with the war here in Ukraine versus Russia is there is a very concerted and very concerning effort that there is a nope, under no circumstances will we ever
never
cave
surrender, we'll never cave. Because, and I know this from being in Ukraine for a short period of time. The west part of Ukraine sees any submission or any kind of kneeling towards Russia as the worst thing that it could ever be done.
Yeah. Whereas,
of course,
the eastern part is totally different.
The eastern part is we should be bowing to Russia. They're a superior nation. They can protect us better. And
they're more Russian. Really.
They're more Russian, and the eastern part of Ukraine sees them as far less corrupt than Ukraine. And of course, if you look at Ukraine is one of the most corrupt Western nations in the world.
And that's not just an opinion.
No, that's fact.
That there's been legitimate articles and things that have actually said that. They're Ukraine is a cesspool of corruption. Even Candace Owens, when she said that, the New York Times tried to say oh, can you back that up somehow? Where are you getting this? And she used a New York Times article from a few years ago that actually said Ukraine is a hopelessly corrupt nation and all that. And she's like, oh, wasn't this you who said that? So yeah, Stephen's right. It's corrupt. There was also Stephen, do you remember that there was a CBS article? No, a video or documentaries that CBS was making, and at one point they said that they could not account for 40% of the money being sent to Ukraine, and they had to completely cut that off because they're well, we can't shine a light on this. This is too problematic. So
and of course we'll probably mention it once we're done the douche of the year segment that the omnibus bill passed today, and so they're sending another $45 billion to Ukraine.
Yep.
So, and of course there's a whole bunch of other shite that was listed in that omnibus bill. Can't believe it passed.
I believe it. Well, I mean, I can't.
I can't believe that it passed.
The corruption in the American political system is pretty heavy.
It's really sad and pathetic that there are 12 Republicans that went along with it, but we're going to continue along with the talk about the douche of the year for now. So, but that's not even the end. So he eliminates all opposition parties. He will never surrender, even though he's hopelessly outmatched and his citizens are dying and he has no chance of winning. And he's basically just like, we will stand as Ukrainians to the end. And so condemning his citizens to death.
He's throwing his own citizens under the bus because he's getting like enormous amounts of money thrown his way.
Yes.
This is like the ultimate.
Like, this is why he went to Congress, was to thank them for sending money a couple months ago and then asking for more, and then immediately the Senate gave him $45 billion more.
Yeah, I mean, any reasonable, rational person would look at this and be like, what's going on here? They're sending like giant amounts of money to this one country at the expense of their own people, like America. But like, this country is basically like, at this point, I remember seeing recently that Russia was not in a good place as far as this war goes. And do you remember hearing about Boris Johnson way back at the beginning of the war, that Zelensky was thinking about like getting a surrender or like some kind of a peace deal? And then he said, nope. He basically flew there, told them, you're not doing this, hell no. And Zelensky caved and all that. To me, it sounds like there is something really, really stinking fishy going on over there. Zelensky strikes me as like the ultimate like sellout kind of guy who, there's something else going on over there.
Yep.
That is very concerning. Yeah, keep going. Keep going with the other stuff.
So, on top of this, Zelensky realized that he's not going to win this war. So he asks NATO for aid, not in terms of like, okay, like, can we evacuate more of my citizens? Can we do this properly? No. He wants aid in the form of a preemptive strike against Russia in speech to this institute in Australia. Ukraine's leader sparked a furious reaction from Russia, which rebranded him a monster over comments made to an Australian crowd. And of course, they deleted this video.
They have to.
He clarified that he was not calling for a preemptive strike against Russia, but he was speaking via video link to the Institute when he made the comments in response to a question from the think tank's executive director. Mr. President, in your remarks, you mentioned nuclear blackmail. Mr. Putin told me the other day he's not bluffing. So may I ask you, this is the Australian guy. Do you believe that the likelihood of the use of Russian nuclear weapons against Ukraine has risen? And what more do you want NATO to do to deter Russia from using nuclear weapons? He replied that NATO should eliminate the possibility of Russia using nuclear weapons. Once again, I appeal to the international community, as I did on February 24th. We need preemptive strikes. So they'll know what will happen to them if they use nukes and not the other way around. Like, that's not calling for war. You jackass.
You're calling for war.
You are calling for preempt. He's calling NATO to start World War III. And NATO was just like, whoa, that's not what we want. Like, you want that? And it's absolutely silly and pathetic that after this, he still has international acclaim. And the establishment is still like, oh, yes, like, you're as great or better than Winston Churchill. No, he's not. Winston Churchill was standing in the face of a dictator who was planning on taking over the world and defending his own territory and saying, well, you know, all of Europe is already embroiled in war. Maybe you guys should help out. This wasn't a one nation against one nation conflict. It was Germany is attacking everywhere in Europe. And if they continue to rise and gain power, then the Americans will not be able to stop them on their own if they're going to face them a few years down the road.
Yeah. I think that the problem here is Zelensky's not asking for backup, because if it was just backup, if he's asking for funds and maybe military equipment and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, okay, well
he already had it.
Yeah, but he's not asking for that. He's actually like calling recklessly for actions that would like hurt more people. So like the problem here is that he pretends and he feigns to be doing these things for the sake of his people, but in reality, a lot of his actions are against his own people. That's the problem. He's doing things and he's taking actions that are not actually like really ultimately for the good of his people, which is the problem. Taking actions that are not. So like one of the things I noticed, like I saw this today, is that Zelensky is actually putting in like heavy like onerous like restrictions on churches. So like the Orthodox churches in Ukraine, which are Ukrainian Orthodox churches, he's basically putting all sorts of, he put like 30 major churches under some serious heavy restrictions. A lot of priests are basically either under arrest or interrogated, and he's targeting religious freedoms, like seriously targeting religious freedom in Ukraine. And this is, of course, the justification is like, oh, they're basically puppets for Russia, but in reality, these are hurting his own people. So again, the actions of a dictator, basically like oh, this is a good opportunity to take down religious freedom, which dictators hate because they don't like having anybody that thinks that some other higher power has greater stake to their loyalty than himself. This is like what China does. This is what Cuba did. All these like dictatorial governments. They hate Christianity. They hate any semblance of it. And Zelensky is following like very neatly, right under their footsteps.
Right in lockstep.
Right in lockstep. It's crazy. We're seeing the rise of the dictators right now. It's pretty crazy.
Oh, for sure. The rise of the dictators. And
the emphasis on dick.
Emphasis on dick. But that's not the end. So when NATO and the other European powers was like, no, we're not going to have a preemptive strike against Russia. That's insane. We're not going to start World War III. Then this happened. So Ukraine war, Poland says missile deaths an unfortunate incident.
Unfortunate.
So Polish President Andrzej Duda has said that there was no signs of an intentional attack after a missile strike killed 2 people on a farm near the western border with Ukraine. It was unlikely the missile had been fired from Russia. 2 workers were killed as Ukraine came under fire from one of the biggest barrages of missile strikes of the war. Kremlin insisted it had nothing to do with the deaths. Poland said initially the missile had hit the farm at Przezdo, about 6 kilometers from the border, was Russian-made. The explosion left a large crater in the farm trailer laying on its side. Accusing Western states of hysterical reaction, Russian spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Warsaw had made immediately clear the debris had come from Ukraine S-300 air defenses. So it came from an air defense. Let's just look at this map.
Yep.
So this is a fairly big area. I've been to Lvov, and it hit right here, and it's this far from the border. As they said, it's about 6. I calculated it to be about 7.5.
Yep.
That is a big way off from a border. It's like, all right, well, the Russians are not allowed in Polish airspace, so there's no reason for the surface-to-air missile to be firing in that direction. And so why did this place get hit? It's like, okay, well, you either have 2 conclusions. You either conclude that this was one of the biggest military blunders in the modern era to have something that goes not only missing your target, but missing and overshooting into an ally's territory by 7 clicks.
Yeah.
Or this was, we want to claim that this was Russia so that there is a call. Be like, oh, Russia is attacking a NATO nation. If they're attacking a NATO nation, this is a declaration of war. Let's get involved on this.
Yeah, there's basically 3 kinds of missiles that can be used in these kind of conflicts. One is surface-to-air, like defensive missiles. One is surface-to-air offensive missiles, which are usually targeted. And the last one is air, like, a plane or a
air
drone.
To ground. Or air to ground or air to other target.
Yeah, so if it was like, let's say, for example, if it was an air drone, like a drone or a Russian jet, okay? That would mean that they would have to like be in Polish airspace in order to make a hit this unlikely. So that's unlikely because they would be very clearly in violation of airspace. So that's ruled out. So the only thing that was available was basically either an offensive or defensive missile. Now, offensive missiles tend to be very, very precise. A miss of that capacity would be totally difficult to pull off, which is what you were saying. But that's a huge miss. That leaves the one possibility, which is the defensive missile, which missed its missile target and flew off into like Poland. So the problem here is this: it's not that like a missile hit, like, in Poland, is that Zelensky knew that it was his own missiles, and he knew that it would eventually be found out, but he tried to call for NATO to jump in, trying to get there before like the truth came out about like the missile. He tried to use a lie to get an escalation, massive escalation into the thing. That is phenomenally irresponsible of a world leader. And the fact that he still has credibility as a world leader should be really suspect.
Yep.
That's a dick move.
That is a dick move. Dare we say a douche move.
Dictator move.
A dictator move. All right.
Dictatory.
So that's the end of the douche of the year segment.
Yeah.
So now we're kind of just going to be in free-for-all discussion. Yes.
By the way, we should kind of mention, if you guys have, if you think like Trudeau, Zelensky, we actually wouldn't mind like seeing what you guys think. Maybe you can make a poll, Stephen, and see what people think. Like, do you think Zelensky or
Trudeau? And then, of course,
deserves it.
If you think that there's someone worse than those two, then go for it. Nominate them and give us like 2 points. I think there's a couple who are bad.
I think that whoever the leader of the Dutch government, he's the one that did the crackdown on the farmers there. He might actually qualify. I don't know if you can think of another one, major one. I mean, obviously Joe Biden. Joe Biden's always.
Jacinda Ardern.
Who's that?
The leader of New Zealand.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. She was basically the one that was like, oh yes, like we have to be wary of free speech because it could post things that are dangerous, and they're just as dangerous as an act of war. It's like free speech is not as dangerous as an act of war, lady. You're just a tyrant.
No, she is pretty bad. I could also make a pitch for the government of that took over Brazil.
Oh yeah, the Lula, who's in prison.
The Lula. Because
the Lula cartel freaks.
Him and his cartel friends may essentially. I mean, we can't know for sure. Like, we're still looking into it, but there is a possibility that there were some shenanigans in the Brazilian election, and that could be like another douche of the year, like for what they did, because Brazil was doing really well under the Bolsonaro. So yeah, definitely hold on to that. But yeah, if you guys think that, if you think Trudeau is a more likely candidate for douche of the year, I think not, because if it was just a freedom convoy, I think it'd be like a fairly close race. But because he's done more, much more than just a freedom convoy, I think he's gone far and above to deserve this. And the fact that he got literally rebuked by the European Parliament shows that he is, the world recognizes that this man did a massive overstep of power this year.
So
well, I've said my piece, man. Take us into the next void.
Well, there isn't really a next void.
Next breach.
Well, there's kind of just open conversation. So if people want to have something which we can talk about, I think Danny and I will briefly discuss the omnibus spending package, just to kind of pass time. But if people want to talk about something else, then please put it in the chat, and we can have just an open conversation. It's Christmas. We feel in a giving mood. So tell us what you want to talk about. If it gets too spicy, I can turn off YouTube, because that's just the way it has to be sometimes.
Are people commenting on YouTube?
There was one person commenting on YouTube, and I silenced her permanently.
Silence!
I was like, no! Enough of your nonsense!
Oh, is it the person that speaks
Iris?
gibberish?
Yep.
Yeah, just a gibberish speaker.
Oh, like, for those who don't know, she posts like 50 messages, and they're all gibberish.
It's pretty bad.
It's bad. I'm just like, if somebody has an actual point to make, it's lost in the wave of Iris nonsense.
That's right.
But yeah, okay, let's talk about this omnibus bill.
Take us into the omnibus bill, then.
So, the things that are included in the omnibus bill are just terrible. So, of course, there's $45 billion for Ukraine. There's $1.7 billion. No, $1 trillion trillion in spending.
Jeez.
And it also includes like an increase in funding for Planned Parenthood, because they're like, oh yes, with the removal of Roe, that means that we need even more funding for abortion. And it's like, nope. That does not mean that.
Yeah.
If anything, you should require less funding because you are performing fewer abortions, or at least you should be if you're following the law, which we all know Planned Parenthood is not.
Well, because they're getting into the transgender game now.
Oh, yeah, they are.
They're expanding.
Well, and of course, I'm sure there is funding in there. Like, nobody fully knows everything that's in that omnibus. Like, Danny, do you know how many pages are in this spending bill?
I have not, looked into it, but I know that one of the things I hate about both Canadian and American, these spending bills, is that they basically become it's like a shark with a million of those little leeches, all around him, just attaching themselves and hitching a ride. It's such a dishonest way to pass laws, where you basically you're like, hey, we're gonna spend $50 million to feed orphans, and by the way, we're also gonna put in a whole bunch of money for for our friends, and a whole bunch of money for military engagements overseas, and we're gonna put in a bunch of money to help increase human trafficking, and it's insane to me that you can do this, that you can actually add an addition to a law or to a spending bill that has nothing to do with the focus of the bill, right? It's brutal to me. I never understood that, or why that's even allowed. Like a couple of years ago, the Trudeau government passed a spending bill, and they snuck in a little provision that allows them to get their buddies off the hook in certain court cases, right? It's like if they're accused of corruption, oh, don't worry, we can offer you this thing to get you off the hook. And that's what he tried to use with SNC-Lavalin. He snuck that in to the actual the spending bill at the right at the end, and then he even had the gall to even say we did this so that it could be used, and that was the rationale given to Jody Wilson-Raybould in order to try to use it. They're like, we clearly put this in there so that you can use it. You got to use it. Start using it. That's the whole point of it. So I'm like, oh, so you guys are lying hacks. Good to know. Lying hacks, throw it in there. So the omnibus bill. I've been really disappointed with Congress, because not only do they engage in dirty play, they try to create these stupid ideas that oh, by the way, voter ID is racist. I'm like, give me a freaking break, you lying hacks. But then they what do you call it? Then they basically try to use underhanded methods to try to get policies going. So in the U.S. Congress, after the election, after the midterm elections, there's okay, so there's a whole bunch of Republican people, the Republicans are going to take the House. And so what do? They basically tried to use the outgoing senators in the Senate to basically oh, you're leaving? Great, don't worry. We're gonna try to get a vote to get this Respect for Marriage Act going on people that have nothing to lose. So a lot of these Republican senators, they basically were like, well, we got nothing to lose, so we're gonna go out on a high note, without any consequences or something like that. It was just so dirty that they try to pass that, and obviously they did it before the new Congress comes in a lame duck session. The Democrats always complained about how the Republicans use lame duck sessions to try to do these things. How dare they and all that? And here they are using dirty malicious tricks to try to get this done. It's pretty shady, and unfortunately, we just see too much of it from governments right now. This why, again, the fact that these the Americans, the media and Joe Biden and the White House, as well as the Canadian media and Trudeau and his minions and all that, they basically try to say oh, we can't we can't we have to discourage people from not trusting our institutions. I'm like, your institutions are acting in ways that don't deserve any trust. Like your health authorities, I listened to a back and forth in Parliament today, where the leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre, he was asking the same question 10 times in just a very simple way to the guy on the other side. It was infuriating. I was like, what's the point of Parliament? If you don't have to answer questions, you can basically answer with whatever you want. You can basically get away with never answering questions. What's the purpose? What is Parliament even there for? You want us to believe that our institutions are worth trusting, and yet you're giving these ridiculous, stupid answers that any rational person can see that you're lying through your teeth and you're dishonest to the greatest degree, and you want us to have confidence that our institutions are worthy of trust. What a farce. So I don't know. I think that the idea that we have to trust institutions is garbage. So the omnibus bill is just another example of Democrats who basically could care less about the people that they govern, and they just want to get they basically, they're power hungry. They're power hungry tyrants who will do whatever they want to get power. So I don't know what you got to say.
Oh yeah, it's basically like they threw massive emotive arguments to try and push their radical agenda, especially with Ukraine and other matters. And then they threw in some massive spending increases, such as massive spending increases on Medicaid and other things that they also included. I was just going over this. It has an overhaul of the electoral vote counting law. It's basically once we have counted an election and certified it, then it's basically impossible to overturn it. It's like, well, what about what's happening right now in Arizona with Kerry Lake?
Yeah.
Kerry Lake went to trial and they presented some really radical, bombshell testimony and bombshell evidence. And what's going to happen? Well, we hope that it goes in favor of Kerry Lake. If it doesn't, then it's the courts are entirely messed up.
Completely, untrustworthy. You and I believe this in Canada.
Oh yeah,
courts in Canada are garbage.
They're broken.
We have no confidence in the courts here.
Well, we looked at a few weeks ago, on the day of the midterm elections in Alberta, the courts of Alberta deemed that it's totally fine to restrict someone their ability to get a transplant because they're unvaccinated. Oh, that's not a violation of human rights. That's what our courts are deciding in favor of. Because Canadians in reality, we have no concrete set in stone human rights because of how our Bill of Rights and our charter is written. And it's horrifying and it's disgusting. And I wish it wasn't true, but it is. And then
any reasonable person trying to argue for that so-called thing, you basically have to argue absurdities, to believe that you can let someone die on the street because the possibility of getting COVID, even though you believe the vaccine works, it's absurdities. Right?
Yeah, completely.
So the problem I'm seeing, and this is the problem that a lot of conservative commentators are seeing, is that they're getting worse, right? The American lunatics who are pushing these things, they're getting worse and worse. The LGBT group, of course they call themselves a community, but really there's the transgender versus the gay community, and they're starting to get some clashes. That's where they get the TERF idea from. But they're getting more and more extreme. And now we're not only seeing aggressive pushes for drag queen story hours, for the legitimization and normalization of pedophilia and all these kind of things. They're getting more aggressive. And they're getting more and more bold in their calls for complete and total annihilation of any restrictions on children. Right? In government, you're starting to get these politicians that just get more and more like bold, and they have no, basically they don't even hold back. They're not even trying to hide the fact that they're like authoritarian, like, you know, like dictators, like here in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Our government, like Trudeau, speaks like a dictator now. He doesn't even try to hide it anymore.
No.
He's just basically straight up.
He's realized that the RCMP is not going to go against him. The Ethics Commission is a joke that has no real power to do anything against him. He's like, what do I have to be afraid of? I have so many major scandals under my belt that if they haven't gotten rid of me now, there's nothing that I can do, almost, where they'll actually rise up and take me out.
Remember a couple, I think even last year, I remember I used to say this all the time, I still say this. I legitimately believe that Trudeau could walk out in the middle of the street in Toronto, in Ontario, anywhere in Ontario, in Ottawa or Toronto. He could walk out in the middle of the street, shoot some conservative, like just shoot somebody in the head, and there would still be millions of Canadians who would vote for him.
Who would vote for him?
That is the level of like,
like
it's not just
the level of conservative derangement, Trump derangement, whatever you want it to be, in terms of anti-conservative, anti-practical, like traditional family values, it's truly it's mind-blowing and it's truly deplorable. Like I was talking to some people over this weekend, and I'm just like, okay, like you're saying all these things about Trump, and I'm like, okay, like I'm not the guy's #1 fan. Like he's done some silly things, and I'm more of a DeSantis guy, but like he didn't do anything wrong on January 6th, and he's like, oh, he like aided and abetted and provided comfort and support to a riots, and it's like, well, no, he said peacefully and patriotically assemble. And they're like, well, that's incitement. They knew what that meant, and I'm like, you are absolutely off your nut. Like, how do you know what that means when he says peacefully and patriotically? It's like, well, that means violently and evilly and insurrection-y.
It's people like that are usually the people that they're just confirmation bias. It's like they you literally can't talk sense into them.
Yeah.
Because they're not fact-based, like, you know, like the people who believe the whole idea that like Trump said that like, you know, get people on both sides. I remember that the debate between who was it, Michael Knowles, that guy who won the American Idol, and then some other guy next to him, I forget, but like he addressed that, and they were so aggressively trying to obfuscate, and it was obvious they were obfuscating. They were not being intellectually honest. They were not being legitimate. They were literally trying to obfuscate because they wanted to maintain the lie. They knew that the truth about the entire thing would expose it. That's what they knew. They knew that if we allow the truth, the actual facts to come out, this is going to expose this as a complete lie. And they were both super aggressively trying to like prevent Michael Knowles from shining any light on the thing. So this is how they operate, which is crazy to me. And so in Canada, I legitimately believe that Trudeau, I do believe that Trudeau is the most dangerous person, not just in Canada, but in North America, because of the amount of damage that he can do, not only for Canadian people, but also for the people in America, because like we're right on top. We have like a massive impact on Canadian or American politics and everything else. He's a very dangerous individual. So like with Trudeau, I think the problem is that even if he's voted out, let's say for example 2025, if we can wait that long, geez. If he's voted out and Pierre Poilievre comes in, he's still there and he's still dangerous and he's still going to act like basically like dictator, because then he's just going to switch around and go attack. You guys suck. You're not taking care of climate change. You're not basically no matter what you do, he's always going to be a massive danger. And I'm going to ask you this, Stephen. Do you think for a second that if, let's say, the Conservatives win, and they get a minority government, but a very high minority government.
Yep.
Let's say, I don't know, 48%, like 47% of the seats in Parliament.
Yep.
Okay. And then let's say that Trudeau is able to get a coalition government with the NDP and maybe the Bloc. Do you think that they wouldn't do that?
Oh, they would totally
for a
do
second
it in a heartbeat.
Like they would. This is how dangerous our Canadian government is. We're literally walking on the edge of a full-on dictatorship. That's why I believe, I've heard people say this, oh, we could never see an assassination. I actually think there is a possibility that somebody out there might actually be crazy enough that they've had enough, and that they want to get Trudeau out. Because I hate to say it, but Trudeau is the only figurehead that unites that entire party. Like before Trudeau, they had several people that tried to take over the party, tried to unite it. They just couldn't do it. They didn't have the charisma. They didn't have all that stuff, right? Even Chrystia Freeland does not have the charisma to be able to keep that party going. So Trudeau is basically the only person he's developed all the relationships. He has all the power and all that kind of stuff. And I think if he goes, I think that the Liberal Party will basically disintegrate into factions. So yeah, I don't know. My hope this upcoming year, and this is one of the predictions I'm hoping that maybe I might be right, is that Trudeau something finally happens that forces him out of politics, where he cannot be in politics like Gerald Butts, where he's completely out.
Yep.
Where
he has no more people to take the fall for him.
Yes. Where honestly, I think that would be the only thing that would literally save Canada.
Yep.
Is Trudeau, something happens that forces Trudeau out of politics, and the Liberal Party is going to basically break down into infighting factions, and there's going to be chaos. And I just don't think anybody can take his mantle. Like nobody in the party has the charisma or the ability to pull it off. I just don't think so. Like Michael Mendocino is very unlikable. I don't know if you've seen him in
I've seen
debates.
something. Yeah,
he's a very unlikable guy. He is not. He doesn't
have the pretty hair. The cute sucks.
Yeah,
and therefore he is a loser in the eyes of the Liberals.
Freeland? Have you heard Chrystia Freeland speak?
Oh yeah,
she's like Kamala Harris.
Oh yeah,
legitimately, she is not a pleasant person to listen to.
That's literally the part of the song where they had talking about Kamala Harris. I was right. Yes.
Did you catch that? Did you catch that video, that selfie video that Trudeau did with Chrystia Freeland? I was going to say Kamala Harris with Chrystia Freeland, and she's like,
I lost your audio there.
No, because I wasn't talking. She's making a face.
Oh.
She's making like this.
I was like, what?
She's literally nodding like this. And I was just like, what are you doing? That's not even... That looks
That's not
so
communication.
Weird.
You look like an idiot.
It literally looked like a trained seal. Like a trained seal. It was so cringy. I cannot even tell you how cringy that was.
Yeah.
It's brutal. But yeah. Now, the other question I wanted to ask before we go into the predictions.
Yeah.
Who do you think this past year was the person that really deserved? Because Zelensky got the person of the year, garbage. Okay, maybe the most notable person in the sense of the notoriety. I'm like, sure, okay, Stalin won, Mao won a year and all that. So I'm like, yeah, I'll give him that for that. But who do you think was the hero of this past year? Worldwide, who was who are some candidates for the person of the year, the person who made incredibly amazing strides for the world or for humanity in general this past year? Give me some candidates.
Yeah. Well, just because he's been in the news lately and he's still standing strong. Father Frank Pavone.
Okay, so what's his story?
So I covered him on Tuesday. So he was recently actually defrocked by the Vatican. And he was defrocked because he wouldn't stop supporting the Republican Party because he's like, well, the Republican Party is the only pro-life party in America.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to stop supporting them. And because he wouldn't stop using his pulpit to preach against the evils of abortion. And he has an organization which he's founded called Priests for Life.
I don't know if you can bring up a picture of him. Can you bring up a picture of him?
Oh, yeah, I can.
I can see what he looks like. Yeah, and I've seen that a lot. Like a lot of in the last 5 years, the Catholic Church has been an absolute nightmare. Like, because they not only do they defend and promote like pro-LGBT kind of like priests, but they also like it's like they're not like they can't even defend like legitimate like like Catholic defenders. So this guy,
this guy. So yeah, I talked about him on Tuesday. He was actually the reason for the name of the episode, because the name of the episode was "Even If You Stand Alone," because even though he got defrocked for doing something which is totally within the bounds of Catholic values, he only had like one other priest or bishop that stood up for him. I'm like, he's doing what is right. He's being defrocked, but he's the one standing up for Christian values, and the Vatican is basically like, well, he risks, like, it reminds me of the whole like JoJo and faith beyond belief issue.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, you're risking our tax exempt status. Who the heck cares? If you lose your tax exempt status, instead of, oh, it's like, well, we can't talk about that. We can't preach the truth. We can't do this. We can't do that. Because if we go against what the government says, and then we'll be losing our tax exempt status. Losing your tax exempt status should be the least of your concerns. Because your first priority is not to your economic obligations, especially as a church. Your first priority is, okay, how can we serve, love, and share the good news of God? And standing up against abortion is one significant way you can do that. So he's one of my candidates for Person of the Year. He's done great work.
I think that didn't the Catholic Church also like recently they did something stupid where they allowed China to interfere with their priesthood or something like that. Like they basically threw a Chinese priest under the bus as well. There's been quite a few Chinese like
the Vatican has been
the Vatican a
like
nightmare
there's
right now.
Oh yeah, and like this Pope is just like, oh yes, like we have to consider like climate change and all these. It's just like, you are a leftist, and this is not what the church should be teaching. Like that, I remember there was a sermon that I went to when we were testing out churches. There was a guest preacher at Skyview Community Church, and he was like talking about the evils of Canada, like the evils of modern day Canada. And I'm like, okay,
oh boy,
like let's talk about like gender reassignment surgery. Let's talk about euthanasia. Let's talk about abortion. What did he talk about?
Colonialism.
Yes. Okay, it's systemic racism. Yep. And
LGBT, like
no, he didn't. He didn't talk about that.
Mean to the rainbow people.
Didn't talk about that. No, I was like, I would have walked out if he had said that. I'd be like, screw this, I'm done.
Yeah, that'd be done. I'm gonna go with they're not taking care of the earth, like not being environmentally
climate
healthy.
change. Climate change and systemic racism were the two modern day evils of Canada, and I'm like, what are you smoking?
Probably the marijuana the government allowed. So.
Oh,
I would be too shocked.
Dark Sage, please say something on the Vatican if you wish.
Feel free.
So yeah, we'll just kind of
the Vatican. Okay, so I remember like in the 90s when Pope John Paul II was the Pope, like he was legitimately a decent Pope.
Oh yeah,
he was very like solid on Scripture. He did some incredible outreach all over the world. He was an incredibly popular Pope. And like you look at his history and you're like, man, this guy led the freedom movement in Poland because he was Polish, and he did some great things. So like that was like that. I think that was the last good Pope that I think the Catholic Church really had.
Like, and there was a reason. There was a reason the left hated John Paul, and there was a reason that there was like 3 assassinations attempts on his life.
Yep.
But anyways, Danny, I know who your person of the year is going to be. So while Dark Sage is prepping, then just kind of start, and then if he talks, then I'll. Oh, he already said it. Never mind.
Okay, go for it.
Pope should stay out of world politics and affairs as much as they have their own views on issues. What right would Francis have to influence nations around the world? You see John Paul and Benedict. Other purpose before Francis constantly talk about their views of the world. They did it was mostly 1 or 2 things, but they mostly kept issues with the Catholic Church. I'm totally fine in that. Like, especially if that issue, like, let's look specifically at something like climate change. Like, yes, we should be stewards of the earth, but we don't have to go along with all the hullabaloo of what modern society preaches about climate change and the climate catastrophe. Like, Pope Francis is clearly, oh yes, the world is ending in 12 years and we have to, like, do everything we can to go carbon neutral, which is totally nonsense.
I love how you, like, actually believes a talking point that denies scripture. Like, the world is ending in 12 years. I'm like, where did you get that from the Bible again? Like, you know,
well, and of course, like, talking about other world leaders believing 12 years, that's the king. King Charles. King Charles and his son Harry are very active against climate change.
Yeah. Climate change is the new religion. I don't know if you noticed this.
Yep.
It's completely the new religion.
It's going to be the new new religion, new social credit score. Like,
it's earth worship. It's earth worship.
Yeah, it is.
Like, the earth takes precedence over people. This is how climate change activists talk in such a way that they basically betray the fact that they don't care how many people have to die in order to save the planet.
Yep.
Like, it's crazy, like, the fact that people actually talk like this. But
we have to go carbon neutral. It's like, well, how do you go carbon neutral? Well, we stop the uses of fossil fuels. Oh yeah, like right now, like, I don't know where our viewers are watching from right now, but I'm in Canada. I'm in Calgary. In Calgary right now. Oh, let's just quickly look. Let's quickly look at the weather. How cold is it where I live? Environment Canada.
Very cold, I'm guessing.
Oh, like, I've been getting warnings about how cold it is here in Calgary for days.
Cold warning.
Extreme cold warning.
Yeah.
Let's do hourly forecast. That'll give you the best lineup, because it's actually going to be warming up pretty quickly here. So right now, minus 28. Wind chill of minus 39. Overnight, minus 40 at 1 a.m.
Yeah, you go outside, it's dead.
Yeah, and then, like, at 2 a.m., that's like the first time the wind chill will drop below minus 40 in 3 days. So it's like, oh yes, we have to stop using oil and gas. No.
What's the alternative?
The alternative is something that's unreliable in this sort of weather, and is exactly why when we had the last time the Texas experienced minus 10, minus 11 weather, that lots of people ran out of electricity and many died. Because the system and the grid is unreliable without the use of fossil fuels at extreme temperatures like this.
Canada does not, you don't really have an alternative option.
No.
You basically, it's natural gas or coal powered, like, you know, like whatever, right? The problem is, like, this is why I hate the carbon tax. Okay, whenever they say, like, oh, we need to, like, have some kind of consequence for pollution or whatever. I'm like, what if you don't have an option? It's like, heat your house or die.
Or die.
Those are the options. And you somehow think, like, well, we're going to put a tax on something that you basically need. It's like, we're going to tax the air. And if you want to breathe oxygen, like, you know, we're basically, like, going to charge you to breathe the oxygen in the air. That's basically the logic of it.
Oh,
so, yeah. So, again, like, going back to the big point, climate activists, these are the same people, very similar to the people like vegan, like animal activists. They don't care how many people they harm with their policies. They'll just do that. So going back to the whole idea of the Pope, I agree that the Pope speaks for a lot of people on the earth. That's one of the unique things about, like, Islam doesn't have it. They don't have, like, one person, one spokesperson that speaks for everyone. Like, the Pope is unique in that sense. But the Pope, his primary focus should be on church-related issues. I agree with you. Now, a lot of church-related issues overlap with a lot of like political, because let's face it, when politics starts intervening into like family issues, like like the marriage and family, that's not the church getting political. That's government getting into a realm that actually is part of like Catholic teaching, which is the Catholic Church has teachings on how marriages should work, how families should work, and all that kind of stuff. So when you say like the Pope should stay out of like politics, I'm like, it's yes, there's some places where like when he speaks on something, it's not political. It's primarily about church matters. However, on some topics like climate change is not in the biblical kind of trajectory, except in a very, very small area of like taking care of the earth, like being stewards of the earth, right? Mm-hmm. But then the Pope goes way outside of that, and he basically what he's trying to do is he's trying to combine modern day nonsense about oh my God, like the world's going to die, the Chicken Little nonsense, and trying to merge it somehow to make it to mix it with religion. The problem is the Catholic Church is going woke very slowly, mm-hmm. and I think that's going to be the death knell for the Catholic Church.
Yep.
Because let's face it, there are a ton of Orthodox Catholics who would rebel you would not believe if the Catholic Church actually adopted some of the progressive views. Like the Catholic Church would splinter into a million pieces. Like, because we've seen that with the Anglican Church, the African bishops. They're like, no, we are not even going close to the kind of like nonsense the progressive American branches wanted. So yeah, I agree. I don't think that the Pope should. This Pope is primarily very political. Previous popes have been better. I agree with you with that.
Yeah, and Darksager, I don't know, like without Trudeau, the Liberals really have nobody of merit or like standing or reputation to replace him, at least not at this point. Like that was the biggest problem they had before Trudeau, is that, as he was saying, Ignatieff and Dion, who were absolutely clueless and they had no reputation to speak of.
Yeah.
And that's what lost the Liberals a lot of money, and they lost their official opposition status for a few years.
Yeah, and actually, like even like the Conservatives, when Stephen Harper lost and he stepped down as leader, we went through a whole bunch of people, potential leaders and all that, but nobody that really had the capacity to be able to be everything. You need a very specific person to be a leader, because not only do they have to be charismatic enough to appeal to people, but they also have to be strong enough to be able to hold the coalitions within your own party together. Because a lot of people criticize Stephen Harper for being a little bit too top heavy, like top down heavy, but you kind of need that in order to be able to hold together a very difficult and very contentious party together. And I hate to say it, like Trudeau basically has a ton of his liberal backbench under his thumb, where he's got them controlled. And I think if Trudeau weren't there anymore, you would suddenly see a gigantic fracturing of that party. I don't think that party would be the same, because he does not have a viable replacement. It's kind of like in America right now, Joe Biden. I don't think Joe Biden will. If he doesn't run again, or he can't run again, if he has a stroke, well, then again, Fetterman got in, so who knows? But really,
questions abound.
Yeah, but there's not really anybody. Like, they even talk about it. They're like, who's going to take over? Kamala Harris? Like, everybody knows she can't pull it off.
No.
Pete Buttigieg can't pull it off.
This is the things we've been doing, and we do every day. It's like, what the frick are you talking about?
No, exactly. Now, the problem is that in American politics, they don't have a viable candidate to take over, and in Canadian politics, I think that's going to be the same thing. Mm-hmm. Trudeau's not going to be able to take over.
Yeah.
Or sorry, no one's going to be able to take over if Trudeau isn't there. That's why I think it's not sufficient for Pierre Poilievre to take over, to win the government. I think you need Trudeau to basically be gone.
Yeah, you need
somehow to leave politics entirely. some scandal that
Not
finally
suggesting things.
He needs a scandal that basically will completely end his career entirely in politics. And you know that the kind of scandal that would require, Stephen?
A sex scandal?
A sex scandal, because that is how what was the governor of New York? That's how he got out.
Yep.
Cuomo.
He didn't get out for killing tens of thousands of people in the nursing homes.
Nope.
But he got ousted for a sex scandal.
That's right. That was the only thing that took him down.
Canada will definitely take decades to recover.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. He's basically burned this like he's like the Joker who walks away from the hospital and he presses that little button. It's like, oh, just walk away.
All right.
That's the hospital goes down.
Yeah. So Danny, talk about Elon, and then we'll quickly do our predictions, and then we'll shut her down and try and get her done before 10:15.
So I actually found out, like, Elon Musk was the man of the year for 2021. I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. But I actually think that this year he really has earned it.
Mm-hmm.
The reason is because he basically, he exposed for a lot of people and provided hard evidence of the insane amount of corruption and government meddling in social media. Now, with the Twitter files that they threw out there, he basically provided hard evidence that the American government was directly influencing and interfering with elections, and Twitter was like fully on board. He basically proved that Twitter was shadow banning and totally messing with people, on Twitter, like they were intentionally targeting and banning and interfering with conservatives. That was pretty much that's now undeniable. And he basically proved that the government was that Twitter and all these companies were intentionally responsible for shutting down stories that would have changed elections. So how is this important? Because not only does he prove that Twitter was doing this, but we can have very strong confidence that because they all think alike, that Facebook was probably doing the same thing, that Google was doing the same thing, and that YouTube is doing the same thing. So we now, whether or not Twitter survives, because right now there's a lot of speculation whether it'll survive or not. I think what Elon Musk basically did is he basically did what no American politician was ever able to do, which is pull back the covers of Oz, the great magical Oz, so that everyone could see the what was going on behind the scenes all along, and it basically blew a gigantic light on everything. This is one of the most significant exposés I have seen in decades. It is crazy what he exposed. But I think ultimately, even if Twitter just exists as a standalone kind of little thing that people can just use, that there's no changes, I think he's changed it for the better, ultimately. Mm-hmm. And it's I think it's the only site, Stephen, maybe you can let me know what you think. If it's the only site that conservatives can somewhat freely express their opinions without hard fear of being blocked or
at least the only major platform used that is such. Of course, as we know multiple times, because now we're on our third YouTube account because they've shut us down for multiple silliness things. And actually, everything they've shut us down for has been, the first thing they shut us down for was revoked. So they no longer ban people for mask-related.
Talking about masks and vaccines and all. Yeah.
No, they still get after you for talking about vaccines, but they do not get after you for talking about masks anymore.
Oh, okay.
So that's one thing. And then, of course, talking about the muffin sale is the other thing that they're really, really not liking on YouTube.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We always say the muffin sale. We're talking about the 2020 election. Because, we've had several strikes against our channels for that.
Honestly, the cookies clearly won, Stephen. The cookies were much better than the muffins.
Yeah, we make cookies great again. All right.
That's right.
So, let's talk about some predictions and Dark Sage and Conquer Worm and anybody else in the chat. Send your predictions for what we think is going to happen, both North America and the world through the United Nations, World Economic Forum, all that nonsense.
Yeah.
So
why don't we go back and forth?
Let's just spitball.
Spitball. Okay. First of all, my first prediction is I predict that we're going to see a massive recession.
Yep.
Like, I know that they've called for it. All the eggs are going to come home to roost. Everything from like the rising like interest rates and house prices, the looming like supply chain shortage. It's going to hit hard, and I think 2023 is going to be a brutal year for a lot of people. I think we're going to see unemployment skyrocket. Yep. We're going to see it's going to be a dark year for a lot of people this year. So that's the first thing I'm going to see coming.
Yep. I'm going to say we're going to see the beginning stages, especially here in North America, of climate social credit.
Okay. So what does that look like?
Well, that will what they're proposing to introduce, especially according to some Dutch members of the WEF, will be essentially that, and we already saw some of it in Colorado.
Yeah.
In that, if you want
the thermostats,
the thermostats. If you want subsidies, if you want government programs, then you can only get energy when the government deems it. You can only use a certain amount of energy, and that's your allotment. Even if you have the ability to pay for it, it's, this is what your allotment is, and you can't go over that, and if you freeze, so be it. And then, of course, there's further stages, but I don't think we're going to get there in 2023.
Not
so I'll
in
leave
this
it for that.
year.
No.
I think that we're going to see an expansion of universal basic income.
Yep.
I think we're going to see that in, really aggressive. Because I think what's going to happen is, I think the Liberals, I think part of their strategy is that they're obviously trying to push Canada's economy and Canada's people off a cliff. Like that's what their goal is. So I think what's going to happen is, with the looming recession, like the massive amounts of economic hardship that's going to hit the country, and it's pretty all predictable, and the supply chain shortages, I think our Canadian government is going to swoop in and basically be like, hey, we'll rescue you, hey, we'll spend money to help you, and they're going to start introducing some kind of legislation for universal basic income to try to put people on government subsidy in order to basically make them entirely dependent on the government. I think that's going to come pretty harsh. And I think it's going to come with strings attached. I don't think they're going to be just free money. I think there's going to be some strings attached to that universal basic income. All right.
I think there's going to be much heavier. We've already seen it with forms of Bill C-16, Bill C-11. I think it's Bill C-21 or 22. Massive speech restrictions, especially here in Canada. And then, of course, the Americans will look at the speech restrictions and be like, look how much they're restricting hate speech. So, right now, we already have conversion therapy laws in Canada. I think they're going to crack down even more on the church. And they'll basically say that if you speak out against child gender transitioning, if you speak out against homosexual marriage, that your church will lose its tax-exempt status and you could potentially be fined. So I think they're going to be starting to push for that. And in Quebec, they'll probably have some preliminary vote on it by the end of the year.
Yeah. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm just going to I'm going to aim for the fences. And I'm going to basically predict that something might happen to Trudeau this year. And I think that the Liberal Party might actually basically lose its ability, or that he's going to be some scandal might happen and that Trudeau will be out. Because I'm seeing a lot of buzz on the ground about how Liberal members hate him. They want to get rid of him because they don't believe that he can get them over that majority thing again. And I'm hearing a lot of talk that Trudeau is becoming basically his popularity is tanked, and I don't think he can get it back. So I'm just gonna go for the fences and be I think Trudeau will be out. I'm just gonna swing for the fences. I'm hoping that that's true. That would be amazing. I Freedom Convoy level. Freedom Convoy level, elimination of the ultimate douchebag. Yeah.
All right. Predictions. Okay. The start of 2023, like up from now until the start of 2023, we're probably going to see like maybe a little bit of Ontario, but definitely Quebec and BC and the Atlantic provinces. There's probably going to be some renewal. I know this was like the one prediction we were wrong about in 2022.
The return of the lockdowns.
The return of some lockdown measures. I don't think they're going to come back in Alberta. Oh, and also, prediction for the Alberta election. That's likely.
Danielle Smith.
Like it has.
Danielle
yeah,
Smith.
we're definitely for Danielle Smith. Something that is promising in that regard. I did see some numbers saying that since Danielle Smith has taken over, the polling numbers for the UCP have grown.
I think it's because the base of the party, the one that felt betrayed by Kenny, feels like they've been.
Oh yeah. Well, they were saying that the amount of support for the Wildrose Independence Party has shrunk by basically the amount that the UCP has gained. I'm like, yes, because those of us who hated Kenny and were potentially supporting the Wildrose Independence Party love Smith.
Yes, because Smith is legitimately doing the right things.
Yeah.
Not just saying the right things, doing the right things.
Doing them. Well, and like her cabinet, like I talked on Tuesday, I don't actually, like I still think Tyler Chandro should be arrested, but his actions as the justice minister are actually good.
Yeah.
Like standing up to the federal government against their illegitimate and unconstitutional gun ban, totally behind that.
Absolutely, absolutely love it.
And I'm like, okay, well, Tyler's clearly just like a puppet who will follow the rules of anybody who's in superiority over him. But as long as the person in superiority over him is Smith, then at least she could use him in an okay manner. So,
okay. So that's
I'm
good.
I'm predicting that Danielle will eke out a victory in May, but she will maintain control of the Albertan legislature.
Yeah, because I think she's actually popular. She's popular with both like the hardcore, like conservatives like us.
Yeah,
but also with like regular conservatives who hate the NDP more.
It's only really like those who are like, well, I don't want to get involved in. Like those are the people that don't like Danielle. It's like, well, she's going too far to the right, and she's doing this, and she's doing that.
Yeah, like my buddy Brian. Yeah, he asked me about Danielle Smith. Isn't she horrible? I'm like, well, no, horrible. She said something mean. I'm like, what did she say?
What did she
say?
Like
people with like she said, if you get diagnosed with cancer in stage 1, then your chances of dying are almost like nil. And I'm like, I mean, that's not terribly untrue. I mean, and people do die.
It's much more likely to survive than stage 2 or 3.
Yeah. I mean, there's people like that who hear things from other people and just like you're like, oh, well, that must be true. I'm like, well, maybe you should fact check it first. Okay, I'm going to make another prediction. I'm actually predicting that we're going to see massive, okay, so in 2020, I think we saw those massive riots, like the Yellow Vest riots in France, the ones in like the Summer of Love in America and all that kind of stuff. I have a feeling we're going to see a year of insane riots, and they're going to be spurred on by energy, enormous energy, damages, like from countries that can't sustain their grids and all that, but also from the food shortages that they basically orchestrated and helped prepare us for. And I think that there's going to be massive riots all over the world when the governments are basically, the people are absolutely fed up with everything. I think we're going to start seeing that the riots come back.
Yep. There's going to be some serious unrest this year across the world, and we have to be. You got to be ready for it. We don't have any sponsors to tell us, oh yes, you need like safe and ready meals, and you don't need
Patriot meals. Yeah, Patriot.
My Patriot supply.
My Patriot supply and
my Patriot cigars.
Yeah, that's right. You gotta survive.
Enough with my Patriot crap.
No. Yeah, don't you know, like Stephen, saying Patriot is a dog whistle. They're like, you know,
was listening to Zelensky say the word patriots. He's like, Ukrainian patriots.
it's a dog whistle. Dog whistle.
Dog whistle.
Dog whistle.
So Zelensky is Nazi. Oh, well, there are, like Nazi battalions. Not that kind of Nazi.
No, those are the good Nazi. Those are the Nazi we support.
Yeah, like Trump Nazi. Oh, that's not a Nazi. What do we say it is?
Like fake Nazi, the completely
Fake
and totally
Nazi.
invented, the imaginary Nazi. Oh my
Alrighty.
gosh.
So,
All right, man.
we're just about to hit 2 hours, so this seems like a good place to end the show. Actually, okay. Let's have a little poll. Do we want to finish the show with something that's kind of goofy, maybe a little bit nice?
I say we should.
Okay. Do we want to sing a Christmas carol?
Do you want me to sing a Christmas carol?
Well, we could both sing a Christmas carol.
What's this Christmas carol we're singing?
I don't know. We'd have to. If people want us to sing a Christmas carol, put your suggestions in the chat. Until then, I'm going to do like a sign off, and if I don't see a suggestion, then we're not going to sing a Christmas carol.
Oh, okay.
So, yes, okay. Well, then you got to put "Happy Birthday" is not a Christmas carol. Come on, people. All right. So, if you've been following along in the chat, Dark Sage, Conquer, Frost. Okay, Frosty the Snowman. Is it your birthday, Conquerworm? If it's his birthday, we'll sing "Happy Birthday."
Kind of have to. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it is his birthday. Okay, yeah, we have to sing "Happy Birthday."
Okay.
All right. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Conquerworm.
Worm touch Jeremy.
Happy birthday to you.
I could also sing the Mexican version.
Or we-
Estas son las mañanitas que canta el rey David.
Or we could sing the depressing version.
There's a depression version.
Yes.
That sounds depressing. I don't know
It
if
is
should do
depressing. Yeah, no.
Maybe you could
It's
sing it.
Sickness, sadness, and despair. People dying everywhere.
Oh, that sounds very depressing.
Happy birthday. My parents would sing that at our birthdays. It'd be like, just to keep you humble. It's like, oh, thanks. All right. Okay. So I'm going to continue. Yeah. So thank you for those who are following along in the chat. Conqueror, Shelly, Dark Sage, Fed12. It was a decent chat today. It was great.
Good.
And if you're following along in the video platforms, YouTube, BitChute, Rumble, we got rid of YouTube because their system is messed up. I might send a message to the guy who runs it and see what's going on. And see how he feels. But aside from that,
Not bad.
if you're following us on our text platforms, like, share,
Steven,
comments.
Steven.
Yes.
Just, I thought, like, maybe since it's the end of the year, it's almost Christmas.
Yeah.
And since we did kind of tease it, I figured we should do, like, at least one Christmas carol. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah, totally.
I have the perfect one.
Okay.
Because this is like, I have the lyrics here, so we can sing it, and you can be like the backup singer.
Okay.
It's Little Drummer Boy.
Oh, you want me to do
It's
the
super
parumpa
easy.
pum pum?
Yeah, I want you to do the parappa-pum-pum. I'm going to sing the lyrics, and you can do that part, because you can definitely pull that off. You ready?
Okay.
And a one, and a two. They told me.
Parumpa pum pum.
Nice. A newborn king to see.
Parumpa pum pum.
Our finest gifts we bring
Parumpa pum pum.
to lay before the king.
Parumpa pum pum. Rumpa pum pum. Rumpa pum pum.
So to honor him
Parumpa pum pum.
when we come.
Rumpa pum pum. Rum-pa-pum-pum. Rum-pa-pum-pum.
I don't know why I got a craving for rum now. I don't know. Maybe that's part of the way that the song works.
It's good that you're not in the same building as Chadwick.
No, that's right. Whiskey, no rum.
No rum, no moonshine.
I now have to go to the store.
Yeah, you don't have to go to the... Well, at least it's still open in BC, but...
It's true.
Alrighty. So, yes. Have a great night, everybody. Have a very Merry Christmas. Have a one... Never knew my ears could bleed that much. Nice effort.
What happened?
Oh, Conquerworm, he's like, magical. Never you knew my ears could bleed that much. We're not that bad.
And like the part of the delay is that the thing that kind of threw.
Oh yeah, the delay is messy. It does mess us up.
I'm in BC. I'm in the future.
And of course, you're using the microphone on your iPad.
That is true.
So that does affect your sound quality quite a bit.
My sound quality sucks.
Anyways, so yes, good night, a Merry Christmas to all, and we will see you in the new year in 2023. So until
God
then,
bless us, everyone.
Sure, we'll go with that. Good night, everybody.